This week in class, you're going to be reading a dissertation, or at least chapter 1 of a dissertation. And so I thought it'd be a good time to take advantage of that curiosity. Everybody at this point in the program is starting to think about dissertation, and you might say, Sarah, I don't have time to think a lot about dissertation. I'm too busy still keeping up with my coursework and everything else that's going on in life. But maybe you have had some thoughts about what you're going to study, what you're going to research for your dissertation. And so now's a good time to take advantage of that curiosity and talk a little bit about it as you read a chapter 1 this week. In chapter 1, you're laying the plan, the groundwork for your dissertation. And so I tell students chapter 1 is the hardest chapter, and that's rough because it's right at the beginning of dissertation. And so it can be a little discouraging that this momentous thing that you've been looking forward to during all of your previous coursework is now here. You've passed your comprehensive exam, you're in dissertation, and you feel like you're not making progress. But it takes a lot of work to plan a well-done study. And so meeting with your dissertation chair and discussing the ideas, trying to find out how you can narrow down your topic and focus is a really important time. And then you will meet with your methodologist to make sure that you're thinking correctly about how to conduct the study and that everything is measurable, it's researchable, that it's a feasible study to do in the time that you're given to be in dissertation. So working closely with your chair and your methodologist, that will be your dissertation committee. Some of you may have a third reader. You will say, hey, this is a problem that I've noticed in the area of education or ministry or curriculum or leadership, and I want to study to try to find an answer to this problem. And when you have said this is the problem and not enough is known about it, then the purpose of my study will be to blank. And from that, you develop research questions. And so this is all sounding very familiar to you because you're like, hey, been there, done that. We've already done that back in our Foundations of Research course. And indeed you have. But this time you're going to actually carry out the study. So this week you're reading dissertation chapter 1 from someone who's not from Southeastern, but that's okay. We want to expose you to different types of dissertation and different ways of doing it. And one of the things that you're going to notice, if you haven't already, is that different institutions do things differently. And that is the same for dissertations. That's the same for literature reviews. That's the same for comprehensive exams. That your graduate catalog is going to differ from university to university. So for Southeastern, when you write your chapter 1 and you kind of get all your ducks in a row, so to speak, then you're going to have a meeting with your dissertation committee, and it's called your proposal defense. Now, at other universities, they might say write chapters 1, 2, and 3, and then have your proposal defense. We think that's a little far into the game to wait and have that proposal defense. Man, if you get chapter 1, 2, and 3 done, we're like, man, you're almost done. You're about ready to cross that finish line. So we like to have our proposal defense as a little informal meeting, but you will create a PowerPoint and you will present your problem, your purpose statement, your research questions, just to be sure that you and all of your committee members are on the same thought pattern and that everything's working together. It's a good time for you to present and for your committee to sit back and listen and say, yes, this student knows what he or she is going to research, and this is a well-developed, well-thought-out plan. Then you pass your proposal defense. That is your chapter 1, and then you start writing your chapter 2. So I know this week when you read, you're focusing on reading a chapter 1, but I encourage you to kind of look at this dissertation that is in the course this week and take a peek at chapter 2. I've already mentioned that universities do things differently. And even at Southeastern, we've switched in our way of writing literature reviews. And somebody made the comment back in our quantitative research class recently that in every class they feel like the expectations for literature reviews has been a little bit different. And that's okay. I mean, we might say in the perfect world, you know exactly what to expect every time you write a literature review, but that's just not going to happen when you're writing it for different professors, and different professors do have different expectations. There are some professors that might allow you to say there is or there was, and you know that I do not allow you to say there is or there was. There's a better way to word that sentence and to be more specific. Some of your professors might let you get away with a little bit of anthropomorphic writing where you're saying that the research study did something. And then you've got professors that are like, no, anthropomorphic writing. The study cannot do anything. It's an inanimate object. It cannot be the subject of your sentence and do anything. So professors are going to have different expectations. They're going to have different areas of expertise. But there's a bigger thought that I want to talk about with writing a chapter 2. So let's say you're ready to start your chapter 2. You already know from your time here at Southeastern that we are not going to use books as resources. We're going to use studies. Now, an exception to that would be a book that is made up of multiple studies on a topic. And those actual research studies or articles that have been written from studies that were conducted are compiled into a book. That would be an exception that we would make. But for the most part, it's going to be articles because that's what we're pulling for our research. And so back when you were planning your chapter 1 and your proposal, you were asked to create an outline of your topics and what you would be covering in your literature review. So now, as you begin on chapter 2, you kind of look at your outline and you might have to adjust or rearrange a few things. But the point of that is to keep you on topic. And you look at that outline and you look at your purpose statement for your research and you say, now, what was it that I said that I was going to research? Be sure that everything is in alignment. And when you look at that, you're going to start pulling some articles. And we've been teaching you in your coursework how to read scholarly writing. It's quite different. And so we've been saying, look at this research article and pay attention to the sample, because it's important to know if the teachers in that study were elementary school teachers or high school teachers, or were they Sunday school teachers. That would be important information to know. You might have pulled information about the site where the research was conducted. There's a big difference between a study that was conducted in Alabama and a study that was conducted in Hong Kong. So the site might be worth mentioning in your study. And you might want to just kind of give the point of the study by rewording the purpose statement or a research question that is pertinent to your topic. You don't cover everything in the study just because the study had 4 research questions and you feel like you've got to talk about all 4. Maybe just one of those questions was pertinent to your study. And so you might reword that question. Maybe you're looking to see if there was some kind of a correlation, and maybe there was. And so you might say that a correlation existed, and maybe you tell how strong that correlation was. Giving the details. Maybe it was studying the comprehension of the 3rd graders with this new reading curriculum, and you found out that they made gains, and it was a significant gain. And so you're happy to report the p-value was less than or equal to 0.05, and you report that p-value and it was significant. And maybe you even go a step further and you say, well, I noticed that the gains made were, yes, they were significant because so many students made gains, but they just made 1 month of learning gains. And as a teacher, I'm looking at that thinking, wouldn't the students naturally go from reading at a 5 or 3, let's see, we said 3rd grade. So a 3.4, 3rd grade, 4th month, naturally they should progress to a 3rd grade 5th month. So if they only made 1 month gain, was that really a very strong effect of that new curriculum that we paid millions of dollars for? I would start to hesitate, even if it was a significant finding because so many students made gains. I would start to doubt that that curriculum was really worth $1 million if the effect was so small. So maybe you even report the effect size for that particular study. And so as you've gone through learning to look at studies and you've taken your research classes in different courses, you have been asked to look at the sample, the research site, what type of research, whether it was a correlation or an ANOVA. You've been asked to report maybe the p-value and the effect size. And maybe you still want to do that for major studies as you're moving into this later phase in your doctoral program. And maybe you want to even do that for a couple of major studies in your dissertation. But we've seen that just going over those articles that those items in the article that we've taught you to pull out and to notice, in teaching you to do that, which I do think is an important skill, and we're going to continue to ask you to look for the problems and the purpose statements and the sample and the site and the type of analysis that was done and the findings and the p-value and the effect size. I want you to be able to find all of that. That's what scholarly reading is about. And I want you to be able to report it, but I want to teach you that it's not appropriate to just go through this little checklist and report on each one of those items and think that you're writing at a scholarly level. If you're just covering each one of those items that we've been teaching you to find in the articles, what you're really doing is summarizing. And so we want to move beyond that. And so some of you in your different courses have practiced at different levels. Some of you have been pooling all the information together and you've never reported a p-value or an effect size because you didn't even know what those meant until you had your quantitative research class. Some of you have reported on qualitative studies and you shared an element that was important that maybe became one of their major themes that they found in the qualitative study. And maybe you've learned how to share that quote effectively, like a little quote from one of the participants, a 5-word quote that was just so meaningful and so impactful. Some of you have had different experiences with different professors, and I don't want that to be a point of confusion. I want you to say, I have had a broad and varied learning in my doctoral program. Those of you that maybe have joined us from other universities and you've transferred into the program, you're bringing your own varied experiences as well. So in writing your Chapter 2 and in reading Chapter 2s in dissertations that you're exposed to, I do want you to grow as a scholarly writer, and you're going to have a video that talks about moving from summarizing and just listing those key points, check, 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 to really taking that information and synthesizing information that you read in this article by Ford and in this article by Mojave and in this article by Smith, and you're synthesizing the findings and bringing them all together. And so for some of you, that might be, I haven't done that before. And for others, you might say, well, I've kind of been doing that all along the way. And for those major studies that I really wanted to share, I did share some of those important details or elements about the study, but I don't want you to feel like you have to do that for every study. When you read a research article, I'm looking at my desk because I have so many articles here. When you're reading a study, those items that you've highlighted and marked and annotated, that shows that you can read the scholarly writing, that you're comprehending it. When you're discussing an article in class or with colleagues or with a professor or with your dissertation chair, you should know those important elements of that study. If at your dissertation defense, I'm asking you about that study that you cited from Ford, and I ask you a question, I want you to be able to know that study so well. But that doesn't mean that you've listed every detail about that study in the writing of your literature review. So working on flow and working on the synthesis of ideas and pulling ideas together from your various articles. Up till now, many of your literature reviews have only required you to have 5, 7, 10, maybe 15 sources. But when you write that literature review in your dissertation, you're going to have pages after pages after pages of articles and sources listed on your research page. So just wanted to point that out to you and tell you to start looking at how, yes, chapter 1s are written, because that's the hard part. That's the research plan. And then taking a look at chapter 2 in various dissertations to see how those writers pull it all together, and not thinking about right or wrong, but just that there are different styles, there are different requirements, and even requirements that change over time. Writing is complicated. It's one of the most complicated things that we ask our brain to do. Can I get an amen for that? You're thinking about word flow. You're thinking about what to share. Am I sharing too much? You're thinking about all the grammar rules. You're remembering not to say there is or there was or there are. You're remembering not to use anthropomorphic writing and giving personality characteristics to inanimate objects such as a research paper or a study. You're thinking about all of those things. And then we're asking you to also follow all of the APA rules. It's a lot, I know. Writing is complicated, but as you review studies, I want you to start thinking, yes, the details are something you should read and highlight, annotate those articles, but I want you to think about your flow as you tell about your topic and you're synthesizing those studies. Your literature review should be interesting. It should flow well, and it should follow APA rules. So pretend that you are working on your dissertation. Maybe that'll be a little fun motivation for you in this course as you continue to work on your scholarly reading and also your scholarly writing skills. I hope this little chat about scholarly reading and writing has been helpful. As always, I'm available for your questions and comments. I love to hear from you. Have a great rest of your day.